Hi everyone, this is Peter Steele with Learn Code Today, and we are going to look at some C# algorithms in this brand new series. Let's begin. Alright, so today we're going to take a quick look at some algorithms. We're going to do just one today, and this is going to be a new series that I'm starting. It's going to go through and kind of demystify what algorithms are. Essentially, and especially for new programmers, it may seem a little confusing, but essentially they are something that you get some input, you give it some rules, and then you get an output. So this could be a basic calculation like we're going to do today. This first one here is basically just taking the sum of two given integers. And then if the values are the same, the two integers are the same, then we're going to triple their sum and return that. And if they're not the same, then we're just going to add them together and that's it. So this website here is called w3resource.com. You can see here they've got over 150 different exercises for some of these. And we're not going to go through all of them. Like I said, today we're just going to do this first one, and we're going to do a video series, kind of just going through some hand-picked ones here. That'll increase in complexity as we move forward to highlight some of the different things that you can do with C# and creating some simple algorithms. They don't need to be as complex as something that Google's going to use for their search algorithms or things like that. They can be just simple ones that are useful for your project or whatever you're working on. So we're going to do this inside of Visual Studio. Now I've already gone and copied in kind of the instructions of what we need to do just to save some time here, and then we're going to go through. So with this here, I'm going to do it one way. That would be most likely what a new programmer is going to do, because that's what they know, and show you kind of the thought process and the breakdown of how that works. And then I'm going to show you a little bit more of an intermediate way to do it, to basically reduce it down to one line. So that way you're not having to have a bunch of bloated code later on. And this is really useful because we'll be using this method moving forward through some of the other algorithms as well, just to kind of clean things up. So the first thing that we need to do, obviously, is to take a look at what the instructions are and what instructions we need to give this algorithm or the computer to be able to take this input and give us the desired output. So for this here, obviously we're writing a C# program, so we're inside of Visual Studio, and we want to compute the sum of two given integer values. Okay, so this is the first important part here, is compute the sum. That means we're doing addition. So if you remember back in high school, maybe even college, with some of your math classes having word problems, you had to know what some of these words and terms meant for what they were asking. And that's essentially the same thing that's going to go on here. So compute the sum is addition. We're giving two integer values, so we're going to need to be able to take input of two values. And then if the two values are the same, i.e. say value 1 is 3 and value 2 is 3, they're the same, then we need to return triple their sum. So obviously triple means multiplication in this aspect, and we need to multiply by 3 whatever that sum is and return that value instead. So real quick before we get started, one thing I do like about this site is that they do give you the sample input that they're going to be using, and then it has the expected output of what you should get. So we will be using this here in our program. So let's create a method here. It's just going to be a public static. Static int is going to be the return type, and we're just going to call it sum ints. And as I said before in the instructions, we need to take in two values, so we're going to have int num1, int num2, and then we can write this method. Now, because we are returning a value, which we'll cover this on another video, but this is the return type here. You could either put void here if you're not going to return anything back, int, string, anything else that you need to return goes right there. So we do need to have a return statement in here, like so, but we'll get to that here in just a second. So if you're brand new to C# or programming in general, you learn about conditional statements, and if is being, kind of the big one that everyone uses. So if we have something that evaluates true or whatever, then, or whatever conditional we set, we jump into that block of code, else we do something else. Okay, so this seems like a perfect opportunity for this, because if the values are the same, do something. If the values are not the same, then do something else. So in this instance here, if num1 is equal to num2, okay, so that's our conditional there. This is what we're checking, our expression. If it's the same, then we need to add those two together. So num1 plus num2, and multiply these by 3. clean that up. We'll go to the front there, and you need to put in that return statement that I was talking about, because we are returning that value back to the calling part of the program, which is going to be up here in our void main. So you can see here, if num1 equals num2, so if these two are the same number, then we want to add those two numbers together and then multiply that sum by 3. Now we need to put the parentheses here, because if you remember back to math, you know, you had the order of operations, and if we had left the parentheses out, multiplication takes precedence over addition. So it would actually multiply 3 by number 2 and then add the number 1 on top of that value, which is not what is being asked. It's taking the sum of these two and then multiplying that by 3. Now down here, we don't need to do an else statement or anything else like that. We just need to do a return. If I can spell that correctly, there we go. And then we just want to return num1 plus num2. And then we'll just end it right there. Okay, so this is all we need for this method to make this work properly. And the reason why we don't need an else statement or anything else like that is because if it doesn't check out here, if number 1 does not equal number 2, then it's automatically going to skip this chunk of code here and just go straight to returning the value that we want. You don't need an else block in there to handle that. So up here now inside of our main, we are going to call this method that we just created, and then essentially we're just going to do that with a CW, which is the not channel writer, should do lowercase CW. There we go. Lowercase CW tab, and that will get you your console write line. And then we are going to sum the ints. So we're going to call the method inside of this write line, because if you remember, we're returning back those values. So we're actually going to want to print those to the screen, so we can actually call this method directly inside of console write line. And then we're going to pass in some of these inputs here. And you can see here, it hovers over int num1, int num2. So we got 1 and 2, 3 and 2, 2 and 2. So we're going to do 1 and, I think it was 1 and 2. Yep. 1 and 2. Okay. And then we're going to copy this here and do this 2 more times. And then I believe it was 3 and 2, and then 2 and 2. That was 1. There we go. And at the very end, real quick, before we run this, of course, we want to have like a console read key. This just allows the output window to stay up so we can actually see what's going on and not just flash on the screen and disappear. So if we run this, it should work just fine. So we're going to hit the little play button up here. And I may have to zoom in here for you. Yeah, I'm going to have to zoom in. There we go. So we get 3, 5, and 12. So if we jump back to the website here real quick, you can see our expected output is 3, 5, and 12. So this is working as intended. Okay, nice. But it's a little clunky, okay? And like I said a little earlier in the video, there is an easier way to condense this down so you're not having to use all of this code right here. We can get all of that code into one line, and it's using the ternary operator. So if you're not familiar with that, essentially it lets you simplify kind of an if conditional statement like that into something a little bit easier to work with. So we're going to return, and then what we're going to do is put in our expression that we're evaluating. So does num1 equal num2, and then do a question mark. So that's the ternary operator right there, is a question mark. Now there's going to be something here, you know, and then a colon, and then something else. All right. So the something here on this side of the colon is what happens if this expression right here evaluates to true. And then what happens if it evaluates to false. Okay. So that's what we're going to do here. So if these two are true, just like before, we want to take num1 plus num2 and then multiply that value by 3. And then we're going to put our colon. So now if it's false, what do we do? Well, we're just taking num1 plus num2. Right? And then, of course, put your end of line character there. So we've now condensed that entire little block of code that we had before into one line. We're returning, you know, and then it says, this is our expression, our conditional. What are we doing? As num1 equal to num2. Okay, if it is, do this. If it's not, do this. Now, if you're a little confused by this and this isn't as easy to read as an if statement, it does get easier as you get more experience with C#, but let's run it just to show you that it does indeed give us the same output and the same values that we had before. And you can see there 3, 5, and 12. So this is going to be really handy, especially if you are using this website moving forward. They use this a lot through the first beginning examples. So just be aware of that. If you can use the ternary operator and condense it down into something nice and clean, then use it, because as you move through these examples, at least through the first 10 or 15 or so, they make heavy use of that. So hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you learned something. And if you've already worked a lot with C# and programming in general, this may be really basic. Like I said, we will be doing videos later on with the more advanced ones that they have on here. But for now, we're just going to stick to the basics and kind of demystify what an algorithm is and how they work, and kind of the thought process of how to go about using them and creating them. So thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you next time. Hey everyone, if you liked that video, you know what to do. Smash that like button. And if you want more tips, tricks, and tutorials, make sure to